Hello, hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host Keegan. And this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And today we have a very special guest, and her name is Cheryl Parker. Hello, Cheryl.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on your show.
Of course, thank you very much for being on.
Yeah, you're
So,
welcome.
tell me a little bit about yourself, Cheryl. What do you do? Where are you from? That kind of stuff.
Sure. So I'm in Ontario, Canada, just outside of Toronto.
Oh,
And yeah, and you're in Texas, correct?
correct.
Yeah. We're very far away from each other, but obviously in our hearts are in the same place, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big advocate of mental health and self care, and I started my journey back in 1998. My 8-year-old daughter Rachel died from complications from a flu virus,
Mm.
and obviously brought me to my knees. And she got this condition called ITP, where your
Mm.
antibodies attack the platelets instead of the virus. And
Mm-hmm.
my son Sean, who was 6 at the time, got the flu, and then I got the flu, and then Rachel got the flu, and she just was not recovering. And so she got this condition where, like I say, the antibodies were attacking her platelets. And 99% of the time, you recover from that, and your platelets just start multiplying again, and you recover.
Mm-hmm.
But she was in the less than 1% chance that she could get a spontaneous bleed. And again, if
Oh.
it's in one of the organs, that can be recoverable too.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel's was in her brain. It didn't present the same way as it would have if it was in one of her other organs. So they were pumping her full of platelets, trying to be able to do an operation on her. They wanted to do surgery and remove the front left lobe of her brain to release the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So that was traumatic enough. And so after hours of surgery, they realized that they couldn't save her, that her brain was too swollen and she was pronounced brain dead. So in the room where we were, saying our goodbyes, the doctor said, had we considered organ donation? And I said no,
Mm-hmm.
but she had. And his
Mm-hmm.
mouth dropped and he said, she had. And I said, yeah. I said, not like 5 weeks before, I had been reading a newspaper article about a little boy who had undergone a double lung transplant. And he was in a hospital bed and his arms were extended in victory. And Rachel said, why does this boy look happy? He looks like he's in a hospital and he's got all those wires hooked up to him. And I explained to her that he had just got new lungs, and somebody died and let them, take their lungs to save this little boy. And so she walked away and she started playing. And about 5 minutes later, she pops her head up and she said, when I die, I want to give my organs so I can save kids. And
Oh.
I thought she walked away because I had grossed her out with the thought of it. But her little 8-year-old mind was just processing the whole thing, and that's what she came up with. And I was so proud in that moment that she would embrace that thoughtful,
Mm-hmm.
giving aspect of it. And so then in the hospital room, when faced with that decision, I recalled that conversation that I had had, and they were just flabbergasted. And at the time, Mike Harris, our premier in Ontario at the time, and Don Cherry were putting together the Ontario Gift of Life organization, and they were advocating for organ donation. And
Mm-hmm.
they were really advocating for people to express their wishes rather than just signing their license to say that they
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be organ donors, because it's the family in that situation that's actually giving the okay for that.
Oh.
So it was important that we express those wishes to our family, which Rachel had done.
Mm-hmm.
Because in that devastating time, I mean, I'd like to think I would have said yes, but it really takes all the decisions away when they've already expressed their wishes. So
Mm-hmm.
in that moment when I was feeling so powerless, all I could do was fulfill on her wishes. So I said that yes, they could donate her organs. So she was able to donate her heart, which went into a 7-year-old little girl and saved her life. And her lungs were flown down to Pittsburgh and transplanted into a 12-year-old girl who had already undergone a heart and a lung transplant. And this was her second lung transplant and saved her life. And then her two corneas. So she was able to give sight to an infant who was born blind, and she was able to give sight to a toddler who had been blinded in surgery. So she was able to impact 4 lives in a very huge way. And that really sent me on my journey of healing. And because at the time, like I said, they were, advocating for this organ donation. And Rachel became a bit of a poster child for that because she had expressed her wishes. And they asked me to do some public speaking. So for the whole next year, I was doing a lot of organ donation advocacy work and
Mm-hmm.
speaking. They flew me across Canada, and I was sitting on panels and at press conferences and talking about organ donation and sharing her story. So I learned in that moment that you can take tragedy and you can inspire people. And I thought
Mm-hmm.
that is so, so powerful. And at the time, I mean, obviously, I was in my acute stages of grief. So I would kind of park my grief at the door and I'd go and speak and then pick my grief up on the way out the door and go home and cry for 3 days, and I'd be a wreck. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, it kept me going, and it kept her story alive, and it kept
Mm-hmm.
inspiring me. And what would happen is after I spoke, like people would line up to talk to me, wanting to share their stories with me. And that
Oh.
really struck me. I thought, my gosh, there's a lot of people hurting out there. And there's not a lot of room, permission, space for people to share tragedy. It's like put on a happy face, be positive, all of that. And I don't know, I just had the capacity in my heart to listen and to be able to give them the space to share that story. And I remember thinking, like, I'm not in a position now because I'm hurting too much myself, but I just knew that I had a gift here and I had something precious that I could share and that I could make a difference. And I just didn't want my daughter's death to be just a sad story and a woman raising
Mm-hmm.
her, 6-year-old son and paying the mortgage and going to work. And I just didn't want that to be my life. And
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted it to mean something. And I wanted this experience to have some purpose. So I knew that once I was on the other side of this healing journey, that I wanted to help people. And so a few years later, and actually even in my acute stages, the hospital, Rachel was at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. It's a world-renowned hospital, and they would actually have some people call me to comfort and to share our experience with, because they saw the strength in me that I didn't see myself at the time, but they saw it. And so I started automatically just talking to people, and I just thought, I've got a gift here and I need to use it. And so once I was, on my road to healing, I got some training and learned how to facilitate workshops and started to work with grief clients, walking them through their grief journey.
Wow. Holy cow.
Yeah.
That is a story. Like I I have this little guy on my desk and I had to grab him because man, that touched me. Like I don't know if
Hmm.
you could see, but man, like that is very deep and touching story. Um,
Yeah.
so first of all, my deepest condolences. But
Thank
it,
you.
it is so amazing that she was able to help other people's story and to continue to save their life, to change it.
Hmm.
Um, and that takes a lot, especially not just for the person giving up the organs, but for the family members and for yourself. I can only imagine that because that's literally a part of your daughter or of someone's loved one that's going away.
Yeah.
But it's so beautiful at the same time because they're still living in essence.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, and you know how they say, like they've kind of figured out that there's memory in DNA.
Hmm.
So, aspects and characteristics of your daughter could show up in other people. So,
Yep.
that's really awesome.
Yep.
So, it's
And
just
and
spreading the
this
light
the
all over.
story even gets more miraculous
Oh
because
man. All
brace yourself.
right, I got him.
because because my gosh, when 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 Rachel had gone through the process, they told us, like, I wanted to know, like, who's going to get her heart, who's going to get her lungs, can I find out about
Mm-hmm.
them? And there was a lot of strict laws around that at the time. I think they may have lifted a little bit, but at the time, like, we're going back 25 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one nurse said, all I can tell you is that it's a 7-year-old girl, and she lives, her operation took place in London, and
Mm-hmm.
her name is Mary. And that was all they could tell me. And so
Oh
I
wow.
just kind of hung on to that and thinking that that was beautiful. And a
Mm-hmm.
couple of months after Rachel died, my girlfriend Kim and I went to Hawaii. And the plane had no sooner took off, and I was giving her updates on the recipients because they give
Mm-hmm.
you anonymous updates and status on the recipients of the organs.
Uh-huh.
And Kim starts crying and she said, I've met her. And I said,
What?
what? Well, my girlfriend Kim lived in London,
Uh-huh.
and her daughter Emily was in Beavers.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to this outing where they went to this pet store and saw all the animals. And her friend Andrew in Beavers, his mom was a nurse at the London hospital.
Oh
Well, didn't
wow.
this nurse bring a guest with them on this outing, which was a mother and a daughter? And the
Uh-huh.
daughter was wearing a medical mask. And this girl walked up to I just got goosebumps. This girl walked up to my girlfriend Kim and took her hand and said, Hi, my name's Mary.
Oh.
And Kim was like, kind of taken back by this girl because she didn't know her. She just took her hand and she started chatting with her. And she was, quite chatty. And Kim said, why do you have a medical mask? And she said, well, I just got a heart transplant. Well, Kim's knees just like buckled. And she's looking at this girl and she's thinking, oh my gosh, this little girl reminds me of Rachel. And so she, kind of braced herself and said, when did you get your new heart? And
Mm-hmm.
Mary tells her, and it lined up. And she was
Oh wow.
thinking, this little girl probably has Rachel's heart. So then Kim did some investigation work, and she got this newspaper article of this little girl, Mary, who had got this heart transplant. In the meantime, I'm communicating with the hospital anonymously. They're passing on letters to the heart recipient and the lung recipient, and I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
letters back from the heart recipient, but it takes like 6 months to go through the whole process. So it's a bit
Mm-hmm.
delayed, like she'd tell me about her Christmas and I'm getting the letter in June kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I, and Kim said I could probably like figure this out through this nurse at the hospital and get you
Mm-hmm.
connected. And I said, you know what? I'm not ready. And I said, and there's laws about it. I want to respect their privacy. But I said,
Mm.
maybe one day.
Yeah.
And so 2 years later, it was the day. And I decided I wanted to meet this little girl. So I called directory assistance and I asked for, well, because she had this newspaper clipping and the last name was Klein. So I called
Mm-hmm.
directory assistance. I said, can you give me the name of Klein? And Kim had thought that they were in a rural area up in
Mm-hmm.
Hanover. So I said, can you check for Hanover numbers? So they said, oh my gosh, there's so many. And I said, well, we're going through them all. So I said, start at the top. She gave me the number. I called the first number and I said, do you have a daughter named Mary? And they said, no, you want to talk to Kevin over in Mildmay. So the very first person knew about this little girl, Mary.
Huh.
So I called that number, or like I got that number and I called it, and the mom answered. And I said, I told her who I was and why I was calling. She goes, well, just a minute, I'll put Mary on. And Mary comes on the phone and she's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, when can I meet you? When can I meet you? And so I said, well, honey, your mom and I will have to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so Cindy, the mom, and we talked about it. And Cindy kind of wanted to, kind of check me out first, make sure I wasn't some crazy lady. So we talked on
Yeah,
the
right.
phone a couple of times and we exchanged addresses so that we could like write back and forth a little more immediate. And a few months later, they came down and
Mm-hmm.
met Sean and I. And so the family and I, we hit it off. Like it was just immediate. There was immediate connection. And Mary came with a stethoscope to let me listen to Rachel's heart, which
Oh.
was amazing. And they brought photo albums and shared Mary's story with us. And it was just such a beautiful, beautiful connection. And to this day, we're best of friends.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, a couple of years later, Mary had
Mm-hmm.
complications with her heart and Mary
Mm.
died.
Oh
And my
no.
girlfriend had kind of been cautious and, kind of protective of me and said, are you sure you want to meet her? Like, maybe, what if something happens and she dies and you have to go through this again? And I
Mm-hmm.
said, what if she dies and I never got to meet her?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you are brushed with death like that, it's like, you can't wait to embrace life.
Mm-hmm.
You can't like not do things for fear of being hurt. So
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to meet her, and it was beautiful to have that relationship with her, and my son Sean got to have a beautiful relationship with her. But Sean bonded with all the kids and is still, has a special relationship with all of them.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Holy cow.
I
Uh,
know, it's crazy.
like talk about a small world though. Like
Mhm.
just the weirdest little happenstance, and you got to meet the recipient. And
Yes.
man, that's was again condolences on a second loss of the
Mhm.
sorts, but that is still so amazing.
It is.
Because every second on this world counts. So,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
but so how did you find the strength to really just speak about this? Because as we all know that grief is something that, like you said, we don't have space for. We don't give permission to people to go through this kind of thing. So to be someone to stand up and say it's okay to do this, or I'm here but you're not really feeling like you're there,
Hmm.
what did it take for you to get to that point? Because
Hmm.
I mean, you're still going on, and I mean, that's just amazing. So like, I gotta congratulate you and just say I'm really proud of you, because you wouldn't be here right now. So
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I think in the beginning, I felt really close to Rachel while I
mm-hmm,
was talking about her and telling her story. So I think that was part of my process
mm-hmm,
because I had an audience willing to listen to me, even though they were strangers. I had people that wanted to hear the story. So, you
mm-hmm,
know, like it's not always easy for the people around you to constantly hear about it either, right? Like I had to
mm-hmm,
deal with that too. Like I I lost a lot of friends during that process because they
mm-hmm,
couldn't be with it, and I had to learn that that's okay, and to let those people go. And there was people that surrounded me too that were fine being with my pain. and
mm-hmm,
and those people 25 years later are still my people. And it's so important in going through the grieving process, learning who your people are going to be,
mm-hmm,
and that it's okay that people leave, if they can't be with it, because
mm-hmm.
like it's not like you're gonna get over it. It's
No.
not like you're never gonna have lost a daughter. It's going to be part of my life. So if
Mm-hmm,
they can't handle it, then it's best that they do leave, your
mm-hmm,
life. Yeah, I think in the beginning it was just the way I process things. And I know that from the outside, when I look, it's like I'm inspired by who I was able to be in that moment too. And I
mm-hmm.
didn't even know that I was being inspiring. It's only in hindsight, it's like, wow, that was inspiring. But at the time, I think I was probably being selfish and just wanting, the attention and wanting the love and wanting the empathy that it
Mm-hmm,
it provided to me. But through that process, it no longer became about me. At some point
mm-hmm,
it became about sharing the story because it would help others.
Mm-hmm.
and I tell the story, and it's like 25 years later. Sometimes when I hear the story, it's like, wow, that's my life. And I don't think about it because
Mm-hmm.
it's not about me anymore. It's about sharing the story so that others can have hope, and others realize that if they're willing to do the grief work, that there is hope and there is joy on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what kept me going.
Okay. And that's totally not a bad thing to be selfish, especially during that time, because it's grief, it's
Yeah.
personal.
Yeah.
It is something that there's no cure all for grief. There's no this, that, or the other. And I mean, I should know I tried alcohol for 10 years, that didn't do anything. But, and for you to not turn to any of those things and get to addiction level is just tremendous in its own right. And
Mm,
uh, because that will break a lot of people. And for
yeah.
myself, like alcohol was a band-aid, and I know I would have ran to that first thing. And I in my history I have done that,
Yeah.
but you didn't. And so
Mm,
that's, to me, that just shows amazing strength right there too.
yeah.
But now you go and you're a grief counselor, a grief
Yeah.
coach. Sorry.
Yeah. 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 I like, I hear what you're saying. Absolutely, Keegan. But I was raised by two alcoholic parents,
Mm,
and my husband was an alcoholic. And so I left the marriage because I didn't want that to be in my life anymore, and I didn't want it to impact my kids anymore. So I was very determined to not have the addiction rule the show for me or
mm-hmm,
use that as a coping strategy. So and my former husband continued to use alcohol as a coping strategy after Rachel died,
mm-hmm.
and ended up taking his own life.
Oh,
So 10 years after Rachel died, he died by suicide. So by then Sean was 16, and then had to deal with that. So that was pretty brutal. But Sean is actually, my son is an admitted alcoholic as well. And he's sober right now, but it's never handled. It's always going to be something that he has to manage for the rest of
mm-hmm,
his life. So I am surrounded by addiction, and that was probably the motivator for me not to turn to that. But
mm,
I understand that it's an option.
mm-hmm. Well, again, my deepest condolences. Your story goes even further and deeper than I can imagine. But thank you for being honest and vulnerable with all of that, because that is another crucial part of the story.
Yeah,
Uh, and a lot of people don't realize that being around alcoholics affects them in similar ways as the addiction itself. Um,
absolutely.
so, again, I have to applaud you on everything that you've done,
Mm,
because it's just, to me, it is outstanding. It's amazing. It takes a person of great virtue and character to get to where you're at. Um,
thank you.
and yeah, and but again, you're helping other people now through all
Yeah,
of this.
yeah.
So you started with public speaking for organ donation. Uh, what kept you going after that?
Yeah, so then I started working with clients. I started running groups, and then the more I saw people being able to heal and move forward, the more it would motivate me to keep going and keep doing this. But over the years, I would see how, um, well, one of the biggest lessons I learned was that grief was not just associated with death.
Mm-hmm.
That's number one. So, and I would see that time and time again working with the clients. They might walk in the door because somebody died, and it was like their tipping point. But while we unpack and we look at their losses over their life, you can see so many other losses that have gotten them to that breaking point. And
Mm-hmm.
9 times out of 10, it's a past loss that isn't even a death that they unlock and get the breakthrough in, which then allows them to heal from the death that they experienced that had them walk in the door. So that's
Hmm.
when I saw that, this is bigger. Like, grief is huge and it encompasses so many things, and it really is a mental health issue. And that's
Hmm.
when I kind of morphed more into mental health, because sometimes people don't even realize they're grieving, because
Hmm.
it's not a death, and that's how they associate grief. So I thought I need to open up the doors and have it be about mental health, because that
Hmm.
was getting a lot more buzz like about 7 years ago, when people were
Hmm.
coming forward about mental health, and a lot of celebrities were coming forward. So it was kind of getting into mainstream conversations. And
Hmm.
so then I started working with organizations, and I did some mental health training with the Ontario Junior Hockey League with youth from 16 to 20-year-olds. And that's very powerful, because if they can get those lessons and get that teaching early on, then they can carry that into their lives.
Hmm.
And in the Ontario Junior Hockey League, in that whole hockey culture, it's like, there's the whole bro code and the whole stigma around, being, you know mentally tough and all that stuff. So giving them the space to be okay to not be okay, you know and to open up that conversation with their coaches and their trainers and whatnot, so that they could,
Hmm.
you know address that stuff, and learn some tools and some mindfulness training and stuff, so that they could, be their ultimate performance on and off the ice, because there's a lot of pressure on those kids.
Hmm.
They've got school, they've got family, they've got jobs, they've got the hockey, like, and they're expected to perform at high levels all the time. So that was
Hmm.
very rewarding. And then I started working in organizations, with community services organizations, who were taking care of weaker people, in that, looking after teen moms, looking after seniors, looking after handicapped and mental illnesses, and their group homes, and like, they're the frontline workers helping the homeless, all those things. So they weren't really taking care of themselves, because they're busy taking care of everybody else, and then go home and take care of their families. And so teaching them
Hmm.
mental health strategies. And then, if
Hmm.
somebody died in their group home, then they're back to work the next day, because it's their job. But meanwhile, they're
Hmm.
grieving. They've
Yeah.
known this person and their family for years while they've been working in this group home. So it just
Hmm.
encompasses so much when you open up the doors to be about mental health. And then again, working with all these women over the years, I've seen kind of a pattern of different areas that women struggle with through their lives and through their transitions, like things like inequality in their careers, or balancing work life, and then union decisions around marriage, blended
Hmm.
families, divorce, all that stuff, and then birth, having children, the IVF processes that women are going through, and
Hmm.
then menopause, also another transition through their careers, and then death, of course. So, like, those
Hmm.
six areas of transitions through their careers, all going to it's all going to bring forth some grief in some capacity, and
Hmm.
and that's going to affect their mental health. So I've just written a new ebook called The Big Six Method, and that's
Oh.
addressing those six milestones, navigating those six milestones through a professional woman's life. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
it's just never ending. It's like, it's such a big topic, and there's so much work we need to do, because a lot of people are struggling.
Hmm. And yes, I totally agree. Mental health has a lot of work to do in the society's eyes, and not only that, but just reform in some areas. But
Yeah.
especially with society.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you had just written a new ebook. That is awesome.
Mm.
Way to go.
Yeah,
I hope
thank
it
you.
does really well.
Thank you.
And those six milestones, those seem to be what we seem to call a midlife crisis of sorts.
Mm.
But and I'm just paraphrasing or whatever,
Yep.
but I'm just saying, like, so it seems that those big moments in life come with their ups and or downs, and
Yeah.
mostly downs. And you're teaching people, especially women, how to go through those moments, how to get the best out of grief, and that it doesn't have to be all bad. That there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So.
Exactly. Exactly. And like, when I look at my grief journey, and I was in this business course once, and they were saying, like, what have you mastered? Like, what makes you the master of your area of
Mhm.
expertise? And so, we start breaking it down. We're doing this exercise and we're doing this timeline over your whole life. And I was thinking, oh, okay, well, I've mastered loss, because when I looked at my timeline, it was like all loss. And I thought, ah, geez, that's depressing. Like, that's what I've mastered. It's like, it
Mhm.
doesn't feel like something to be proud of. And they said, no, 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 it's not loss. And I was like,
Mhm.
well, I don't know. It looks kind of like loss to me. And they're like, no, no, go deeper, go deeper, go deeper.
Mhm.
And so then I went deeper, and I was like, oh, I see. It's like, it wasn't actually, my life isn't about loss. It's actually about how I recreated myself in the face of the
Mhm.
loss. So I was like, oh, it's about recreation. They're like, no, it's
Uh-huh.
not that. And it's like, oh, geez, I was
Oh, man.
that. And they're like, no, go deeper, go deeper. So then I started looking again. It's like, okay, well, what did I master when I experienced a loss and then I was able to recreate myself in the face of that loss? What did I master? And I realized it was adaptability.
Mm.
Adaptability was what I mastered.
Mhm.
Being able to pivot through those transitions in my life. That's what I mastered. That's what I've spent those 10,000 hours mastering. So that's where, because I used to call the business My Good Grief. And then I rebranded, and it's like, now it's Adapt DNA, because
Mm.
adaptability really is in our DNA. We are
Mhm.
naturally adaptable, but it's also a soft skill that we can develop. And
Oh.
so that's what I want to, instill in people, that
Mhm.
you do have it in you. We all do. And you can develop it too. Just
Huh.
by using mental health strategies and self-care strategies and adaptability skills, you can master these transitions, and you can find joy. And life is inevitably is going to throw us curveballs, but who we are in the face of that's what's going to determine how we land and how we keep going.
Yeah, for sure. Adaptability, that is a big thing, because life isn't the same day to day
Mm-mm.
in the least.
Yeah.
And I like to take it for granted, some of the things that uh just happen every day, traffic and or no traffic, and just all these little nuances throughout my day I don't notice, and then whenever they're gone, it's like, oh, hey, that's something different. Or like, I don't know, but adaptability is one of those things that if you don't actually come to master,
Mhm.
then eventually you kind of get stuck in the mud.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I
Because then
mean,
you're just
for
going to even like ebb and flow with the circumstances that are getting thrown at you. Like,
hmm
I don't know what the road rage is like in Texas, but we got a lot of road rage up here in Ontario.
oh,
And
it
I
can be
mean,
pretty bad.
just somebody cutting you off in your morning and that ruining your day, like that
Hmm
is reality for some people. If you
Yeah.
could just adapt to, like, wow, that person didn't see me, and like, what have they got on their mind that they're not paying attention, or
hmm
where are they trying to get to in a hurry? Like, just like changing the context up to not buy
hmm
into the road rage and just be adaptable to the situation in the moment.
Yeah.
That is so powerful, that in itself.
Yeah. So you're looking at adapting your perspective.
Hmm.
You're not necessarily looking at changing the circumstances. You're saying, I'm
Yeah.
looking from this perspective, and now I'm looking over here. And it's going from a space of negativity to one of more neutrality, at least, to
Yes.
positivity.
Yes. And
So,
not overlooking the negative, because
hmm
I'm not I'm not trying to have everybody just put on a happy face. I feel like the negative has to be acknowledged, the anger
hmm
has to be acknowledged. Like, grief to me, it's like it has to be acknowledged, it has to be expressed before it can
hmm
be resolved. So it's not about just jumping over or going around something. It's like, I really believe in free to be real, because
hmm
I remember going through my grief process, and everybody wants you to be okay, and it's like,
yeah.
darn it, I'm not okay, and it should be
hmm
okay for me not to be okay. So
yeah.
I do honor people for where they're at and meet them where they're
Mhm.
at. I'm not trying to get them anywhere.
Mhm.
It's an invitation kind of to let's try on a couple different things, but it's
Mhm.
their own exploration. It's not even about me getting them somewhere or trying to get them to think a different way. It's really about being introspective and them
Mhm.
finding their own answers that are going to work for them, because there is no like two people the same, right? so
Mhm.
so it's different for everybody. Like almost 20 years, I've never seen anybody do the grief program the same two ways. It's
Mhm.
so individual. Like we are as unique as our fingerprint, right? So
Mhm.
everybody's going to have different coping strategies, different cultures, different beliefs, different values, like, and you bring all of that to that process, right? So it's really what I do is ask the questions for them to do the work and for them to
Mhm.
be introspective and figure out what's going to work for them.
Yeah, and that is awesome. And I love how you said that you're not downplaying the anger and the
Mm-mm.
negativity. You're inviting the people into this work. You're
Yeah.
not course correcting or taking them to a specific destination or anything.
Yeah.
You're actually sitting there and you're saying you have to not necessarily embody the negativity, but you have to say, hey, look, it's there,
Yes.
but I'm not going to play into it. I'm not going to let it tell me what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And
Or allow
that's
yourself to
huge.
sit in it, but like give yourself a
Hmm.
time frame, maybe, you know
Yeah.
um because I can't skip over the anger. I can't skip over sadness. I can't ignore that I'm disappointed. I can't ignore that, I've been betrayed or whatever the case may be, right? It's
Uh
all
huh.
of it. Like it's all of it that's going to make us get us through that path.
Yep. And there was one other thing in there. What was it? The adaptability, not sitting. Oh, the grief. Grief. Sometimes it likes to express itself in anger.
Mhm.
uh,
Oh
and
yeah.
so a lot of people don't realize that whenever they're really upset and angry, underneath all of that is grief. And I've
Mhm.
learned that myself, and that it can be a emotion that causes secondary emotions, and those secondary emotions can be so hard to break through.
Yeah.
Getting to the grief itself and figuring it out is really difficult. So you help people go through that process too, I'm sure. Going like
Exactly.
going, no, you're not necessarily angry. You're feeling it, but what's driving the anger?
Yeah.
Uh
And
so
that just comes out by asking questions,
mhm.
and then they see it for themselves.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So whenever you're also going back to those 6 milestones, which one of those seems to be the one that trips up most women? Which one seems to be the most common, if you will?
I think probably the work life
Balance.
balance is a big one.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's thrown around a lot, but really like trying to hold it all together. I mean, because it
Mm-hmm.
encompasses so much. Like there's a whole ocean of conversation around the work life balance. I
Okay,
would say that's
and
the most common one. Yeah.
that's fair, and that's interesting because I would say that that one ties right back into adaptability.
Yeah.
So,
You're getting it.
uh, so whenever you're doing grief counseling and stuff, you're asking questions and you're more or less kind of letting the person guide themselves, or
Yes.
because you're not sitting there, you're not telling them you have to do it this way,
Mm-mm.
because you've experienced it yourself. So you know
Mhm.
yourself that I'm sure you tried self-help books and you found things
Mhm.
that worked and didn't work. You
Yep.
found things that you found and you improved on,
Mhm.
and so on and so forth. And you've even made things all on your own because you followed your intuition.
Yes.
So it's amazing that you get to help people walk through that. So what do you think happens whenever people get really rigid in trying to get over their grief? Do you think they're trying to hold on to it for a reason?
Sometimes. Sometimes
Sometimes.
for sure. I know that I was a victim of that for sure.
Uh,
I felt like when I was in that pain, I felt close to Rachel. Like
mhm,
I didn't want to lose her. I was in so much pain not having her there that being in the pain kept me connected with her.
mhm,
And it wasn't until I was willing to actually lean into that pain, lean into the anger, lean into the sadness, that I could actually start the letting go process.
mhm,
And it wasn't until I let go that my heart was open to let Rachel in. And that's when
mhm,
I felt even more close to her. And it's hard to explain that to somebody because it feels like if you're in the pain, you're close to them and you're holding on to their memory and you're honoring them somehow. But
mhm,
it's actually the opposite. But until I
mhm.
went through that, I did not know that.
Yeah.
And so I do see a lot of people. That is one reason that people hold on to it. Another example is going through a divorce. That's a
Mhm,
loss, and and sometimes you can be angry, and um, you can hold on and be rigid about that because you're being right, and you don't realize that that's what's keeping you stuck is your
mhm,
story about you being right and wanting everybody to kind of buy into your story, and you're the good guy and he's the bad guy or she's the bad guy or whatever.
mhm,
So that can keep you rigid too in it.
mhm,
But I find most people that come to do the grief work, they're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they're
yeah.
actually open to something.
Mhm,
So I I haven't really had anybody that, well, I remember one client, she was pretty dug in about being right and holding on to her anger because
mhm,
of the circumstance around her son's death,
mhm,
and understandably. So, she kind of agreed to, she acknowledged that she was being right about something. So there was
uh-huh,
a little piece that I feel like maybe wasn't complete when she left the program, but
mhm,
she acknowledged that. And she was
mhm,
kind of okay with that she was going to hang on to that little piece of being right about it, about the circumstances of his death. So,
mhm,
but I mean, other times I had a woman that came to my program. Her son had died 6 years before, and her
oh,
marriage was about to fall apart. She was getting estranged with her daughter, and like her life was just in shambles. And she didn't talk about her son. She didn't have pictures up about her son. It was like nobody was talking about it. And I
mhm,
remember thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with her? Like 6 years, she's like got dug in around this, right? Like she's
mhm,
being right about something. And 5 weeks in, she brought photo albums ready to share stories about
oh,
her son. And then by the
oh,
end of the program, she had hope around her marriage and she had healed the relationship with her daughter. So, and she ended up getting complete about an abortion she had when she was 16 years old.
oh,
That was
wow,
totally unrelated to her son's death. So
uh-huh,
that's just how things can unravel. So she come in like pretty dug in after 6 years of her
mhm,
story, but in 5 weeks she let something go and was able to open up. So that's what's
wow.
possible.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying at the very beginning how sometimes one incident from the past is the actual root cause, and everything else is just kind of a buildup. And maybe just because it's more apparent, that's oh, hey, the big red flag, that's the case. Whenever really it's way out in the distance, though.
Yeah. Totally in their blind spot.
Uh huh.
Another woman, she was 57 years old. Her husband died. She just didn't want to live anymore. She couldn't work. She had been a supervisor at work, but she couldn't work. She was seeing a therapist. She was just totally down and out in her life.
Mm-hmm.
And she did the program, and gosh, she ended up getting complete about her dad squashing her dreams about going to art school when she was 19.
Oh.
And she got complete at the end of the program. She quit her job. She sold her house. She moved from Toronto to Ottawa. She went back to art school, and now she's thriving as a professional artist and in a new relationship.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Nice.
you just can't make this stuff up. So, yeah, so that's what's possible when people actually do the introspective work and do the exploration for themselves.
Hmm. And that is way too cool.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's great that you mentioned it earlier that you have to be ready. You have to be willing to be sick and tired of being sick and tired,
Yeah.
because that's how it was for addiction and me. And
Mm.
it sounds like the same kind of thing. Someone's holding on to pain, but why?
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to addiction. Why am I holding on to it?
Yeah.
And it's really interesting how grief and addiction are right next to each other, and that kind of
Hmm.
highlights what you were talking about with it being mental illness, mental health related.
Yeah.
They're almost side by side, and that's kind of one reason why I was saying I'm so glad that you didn't fall into that, because they're so parallel.
Yeah.
It seems.
Yeah.
Um, and you can't sit there and force a horse to drinking water.
No.
Uh, but if you have one that's willing to go, you can at least show it like, hey, like I may not be able to take you the whole way,
Yeah.
but I can at least show you and give you tools on the way there.
Yeah.
So,
And that's what I've done with my son. I mean, all I can do is give him the adaptability skills, and I've had him do my grief program. And I remember one time he fell off the wagon, and his boyfriend contacted me and wanted me to intervene. And I was
mm-hmm.
like, "What would you have me do? Don't you think that if I could have done something before, I would have done it? I have done everything possible." It's like, this is up to Sean. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't facilitate this,
Yeah.
So he was angry at me at the time because, he's like, "This is your son." And it's like, "Oh, I know." I have the scars. I I have the broken heart. But I didn't cause it. I can't cure it. I can't change it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you've been sober for 10 years, you probably have had access to 12-step programs, right? So it's like, you have to learn being in those rooms what you can and cannot control, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Sean, got his help and got sober again, and you know that's just how it goes.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. You're going to
Yeah.
have to tell them congratulations on sober time,
Thank you.
because I just got my 3 years a couple weeks ago at this point.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
yeah.
Congratulations. That is a big flippin' deal. three
Yes, ma'am,
years.
it
Good
is.
for you. Good for
Thank you.
you.
I mean, I'm excited. I'm celebrating as often as I can, but I
Yeah.
also know that it just takes one day at a time. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's what I know whenever I've walked through grief, that's what it took, was literally just one day at a time, because
Yeah.
sometimes all I had was the strength for just this moment
Yeah.
and no more. Like the future was bleak,
Mm.
nay, shall I say, non-existent
Mm.
to me. And so I know that grief acts much the same way. It
Yeah.
blocks us being able to see the future because we're focusing on the negative.
Yeah.
Um, so, what is one thing that you like to try to tell people to snap them out of that negativity, to get their mindset to change perspective, maybe?
Hmm. I think, what I often say, and it sounds cliche, but just to be kind to themselves and to give themselves permission to be where they're at.
Mm,
And it's not a destination,
mm-hmm.
it's just part of it.
Yeah.
And to reach out, there is help out there. There's a lot of people like you and myself that want to help others through this pathway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's just great. Because, and you said earlier too that community is one of those big things, having people
Oh,
support.
oh yeah.
Um, so I think someone just tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, you got this. Keep going," is sometimes
Yes.
enough.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I remember being really annoyed at the people not leaving me alone when I was in my really dark places. Like, go away, leave me alone. I just want to die.
Mm-hmm.
But they just kept coming
Yep.
because they knew better than me. And I remember 4 years after Rachel died, I remember thinking, "Oh, I'm actually going to survive this." And
Mm-hmm.
they all said, "Oh, Cheryl, we knew you would." And I said, "I didn't. I didn't."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You don't see it for yourself. So
No.
thank goodness others can see us through their eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and because sometimes you need that.
Yep. Much like you said earlier, people could see your strength whenever you couldn't see it for yourself.
Exactly.
So, and that's just way too amazing. Your whole story just completely blows me away. And I mean, you're literally like a walking legend, you know.
Oh, Keegan.
No, you are, because that is literally one of those stories that you read about in books that
Mm.
inspire people to just pull up their bootstraps, if you will, but not to sit there and trudge on alone. Your story
Yeah,
is sitting there telling them it's okay to not be okay. Your story
yeah,
is telling people to get help if you're feeling like you need help.
yeah.
And those are the kind of stories that we need,
Hmm.
because yeah, you were able to walk through it all, but you also are giving credit where credit is due.
Yeah,
So it's just gone full circle to where you're helping people get out of it too, because who better to teach someone this kind of thing than someone that's been through it themselves.
yeah. And that's why I didn't really choose to do the therapy route. I wanted to do
Mhm.
the educational side of things and teach more than do the therapy.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, and like storytelling is so powerful. And
Yes.
I mean, here's another crazy story. So, Rachel's funeral. My
Mhm.
brother played hockey at the time, and
Mhm.
his friend who he played hockey with came to the funeral to support my brother. And
Uh-huh.
he heard the minister talking about Rachel donating her organs.
Mhm.
So this guy approached my brother because he worked for a Toronto newspaper. And he said, "Do you
Mhm.
think your sister would let me do an interview and tell the story about Rachel's organ donation?" He goes, "I don't know. I'll ask her." So Wayne
Uh-huh.
asks me, and I said, "Absolutely not. My daughter died. It's not a news story." And so Wayne's like, "Okay, no problem. I'll tell Kevin." So a day or two later, I thought, just a minute. I made the decision about organ donation because I saw that article in that
Mhm.
newspaper. And then she
Mhm.
made a decision. And I thought, how dare I not pay it forward? So I called
Mm.
Wayne and I said, "Tell Kevin I'll do the story." So
Mhm.
Kevin came over, he interviewed me. It ended up being the front page story in the Toronto newspaper with a 2-page spread on page 4 and 5. And
Wow.
Kevin won an award for that story. And his editor submitted it to the Chicken Soup for the Soul people.
Uh-huh.
And it was picked as the #1 story in the Chicken Soup for the Parents Soul book on page
Wow.
289. Yeah.
Holy cow. See, other other people see the same thing.
Yep.
So your story is inspiring people, your story is helping people.
Yeah.
And so you're not just sitting there and letting your story tell itself. You're continuing the story.
Yeah.
And
And I
that's
remember
awesome.
like wanting to work with so many people, and I was like, how do I get this out to people? How
Mhm.
do I let people know that there's hope, and
Mhm.
I was meditating at the time, and the answer I got was, what if it wasn't about you wanting to
Mhm.
talk to people? And I thought, well, if it wasn't about me, I think I would just make all my lessons and all my pitfalls and all my knowledge, I would like put it down on paper and send it out to the world.
Mhm.
So I wrote a book called My Good Grief: Healing from Loss, and it's available on Amazon. And let me just grab it here
Awesome.
and show you. And I thought, you know what? If I just put all my lessons down in a book, then it's
Huh.
out there in the world, and then people can, do their own healing on their own time and their own
Mhm.
terms. And at least my lessons are out there in the world. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
That is very sweet and kind of you. And now everyone that is going to listen to this episode knows that they should go check out your book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love the title on that, My Good Grief.
Yeah. 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 I didn't want it to be doom and gloom. I didn't want,
Mm-hmm.
and I used a sunflower as my logo because I wanted it to be like about hope, not about
Mm-hmm.
the sadness, and
Mm-hmm.
my grief was good to me. Like, not
Yep.
at the time. Certainly, it felt cruel. It felt relenting. It felt like awful. It was dark. It was the most horrible time of my life. But
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't trade the lessons that I learned through that for
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Yeah.
So it is good. It can be
Mm-hmm.
good. And grief slows us down.
Yes.
And that's kind to us.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, like, I felt like I had brain damage for a long time because I couldn't concentrate and I couldn't move fast. But that's grief being kind to us, slowing us down,
Mm-hmm.
because our brains couldn't take it all in at once. So
No.
our brains know that. And
Mm-hmm.
so it is kind, and again, that's something that you learn kind of along the road and down the road, not when you're going through it.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the throes of it, it definitely feels like anything and everything is against you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but that is awesome that it's about the positivity, it's about the future, it's about
Yeah.
the hope aspect, because hope is a little light in the darkness that sometimes can light the way.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
we are right near the end of the episode, but here on Retrieving Sanity, we do like to try to get people on more than once, do a little bit of a catch up. And must I say, if history continues, you're going to have another story to tell, and you're going to make me realize just how small the world really is.
It is.
um,
Well, you're in Texas and I'm in Ontario. Now we know each other.
yeah,
The world
and
just got smaller for us.
oh yeah, next thing you know, I'm going to be in Walmart and someone's going to be like, "Hey, have you talked to Cheryl lately?" And I'll be like, "I just interviewed her. Wait, how do you know her?" um, but real quick, give yourself a shout out to any of your websites. If you got anything, like literally anything, your book. Again, if shout out time,
Sure,
what you got?
sure. Yeah, well, you can visit us at www.adaptdna.com. There's all kinds of free resources on there, and my ebook is going to be probably available in the next week or two, just finalizing the landing page for that. But you can connect with me also on Instagram, and on, oh gosh, I'm even on TikTok. My son got me on TikTok last Christmas. So Instagram, Facebook. Um, yeah, you can find me on all those social sites, and I'll give you those links after,
All
Keegan.
right.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I'll make sure to post them with the episode link and everything.
Okay.
Um, and so we'll look forward to seeing you in the future. And until then, just stay you, because you're awesome. So just keep on keeping on.
Thank you, Keegan. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for being on. I can't wait to see you again.
Okay. Take care.
Best wishes and much love. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Shalon.